The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. President Trump is inheriting a world in chaos, thanks to President Biden's waffling policies and weakness on the world stage. And joining us now to discuss many of the foreign and domestic policy battles President Trump and his team are now dealing with is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, former Department of Defense intel officer and current president of Project Sentinel. Tony, it's great to have you here.
Hey, Rita, always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
So how much of a mess do you think President Biden has left President Trump and America?
Well, just from going on what we've seen over the last 3 days, it's immense. First, it was announced that they've been cooking the books at Department of Justice regarding crime. We kind of all knew that, but we have the evidence now. And what's going to happen is that the more of the professionals and appointees that President Trump roll into government, the more we're going to find all of the absolute horrible leadership that Biden had and all of his lieutenants. And remember, Rita, the issue is not so much about right or wrong. We know they were wrong. Now we just have to figure out what degree of wrong they had gone to, and then begin that repair. The repair is going to take a while because he's going to get his initial team in there. They're going to identify a lot of this stuff. But Rita, it's going to take President Trump appointing constitutionally focused individuals who are loyal to America, to putting our interests first into every single political appointee position that's available. He didn't do that last time. He was talked out of it. I think President Trump's learned a lot of lessons regarding the fact that we got to repair the damage, and then we've got to actually put all the people in place that can do the real work of supporting his policies. It's going to take probably another 2 months to figure out all the things that Joe Biden and his team broke on the way out.
How voluminous is that task? Because, he certainly knows much more now who the good ones are, who the bad ones are, who the ones who are loyal to America, not themselves. But we're talking so many people within so many departments. How voluminous, and there's going to be some bad apples that are going to squeak through probably.
He's going to have to separate. My old boss, Bob Harding, used to say, you can juggle a number of balls any given time, but you got to focus on the glass balls. Always keep those in the air. Rubber balls, you can let those bounce and pick those up later. That's what President Trump's going to have to do. Figure out what the glass balls are, focus on keeping those going, and frankly, let everything else collapse. Right now, Mike Waltz is essentially the process of firing the entire National Security Council. Good on him. Getting rid of everybody, clean start. He needs to do that. President Trump needs to do that all across the government. There can't be Bush appointees, Obama appointees, Bush appointee, either Bush, and then Biden appointees. They all have to go. And again, that was a mistake he made last time. I don't think he's going to make that mistake again, especially by the fact that he has the power. He was talked out of using that power by people like John Kelly, John Bolton, people who really pretended to be on his side, but were there to always limit his ability to do his job of actually implementing policies that he felt were proper for America. Obviously, the American people feel his policies are right, and that's why they reelected him.
How do you also weed out even within, like, say, State Department? I mean, look what happened last time. We found out about Robert O'Malley, that guy who there's allegations that he seemed to have an affinity towards Iran, a sympathy, and certainly at a time where the Middle East is exploding, that's a very dangerous proposition, and there are so many people still at the State Department.
Right. And that's where Marco Rubio is going to have a huge task, because you can't fire everybody, unfortunately. And this is where, with the professional staff, with the full-time government employees, you're going to have to be a little more discerning on how you get rid of them. There are ways to do that. There's ways of putting people in places where they can't do any damage. There's things you can do regarding forcing early retirements. But this, again, is going to require Marco Rubio bring in a set of deputies who could help him do this. So it's going to take, again, 2 months just to find out the damage. I forecast that you'll have most of the deputies in place by mid to late summer. And that means appointees. And frankly, there are people still in the system, Rita, I talk to every day who are still loyal to the Constitution and are all for the ideas that this president's put forward. I've had people contact me from multiple agencies asking me if President Trump is really going to do what he's doing. Well, he's doing it. And I think he's actually going to encourage those who want to behave in a manner that comports to their oath of office. I think they're going to stay, and they're going to be great allies within the ranks of the government employees and the military to help facilitate the change of direction of the whole government.
How enormous of a task is it securing the homeland, Tony? Because obviously we look at all the damage that was done by so many of the illegal migrants coming in, many of them criminal migrants. How much of a task is that going to be? And the cartels are not going to be happy that President Trump is rounding up and also sealing the border. Well, it's interesting. The New York Times has come out and said that somehow we're going to hurt ourselves economically by declaring terrorist or drug organizations terrorists. It's kind of, I wonder whose side they're on sometimes. But that's the point. There's three things that are going to have to be done. First, they're already doing it. They're going to finish the border wall. They're actually now moving forward to reestablish contracts, materials, all those things to do it. Secondly, and probably more importantly, they've already started deploying military forces along the border to stop any illegal immigration coming across those areas which we can't cover. Third, as we start looking at the cartels, we're going to have to treat Mexico like it was East Germany during the Cold War. The Mexican people are not our enemy, but the cartels most certainly are, and the Mexican government cannot control them. So what we're going to have to do is find a way to start planning as if we have adversaries south of the border, because we do. Something called intelligence preparation of the battle space, something a number of us recommended back in the 1990s, Rita, when we first saw Mexico starting to go down the way it has. We recommended we start doing detailed targeting of drug groups, drug cartels, drug mafias, and track everything they're doing, because they clearly were in the trending then to take over the country. They pretty much have now. And we were denied that for any number of political reasons. Well, the politics have changed. Tom Homan wants it done. I think the military, once they're given the order, will be able to do a great job of not only facilitating moving illegal aliens out, which they're doing, but we'll have a spectrum of special operations forces available to do the very things we do in the Middle East and other places in Mexico when we're asked to do that. Do you think we'll ever get Mexico on board? Yeah, I think we will. It's a matter of political will. And I cite for you Colombia. One of the places that was very much under control of narco-terrorists was Colombia. There's a number of books out there, one of the best to read about kind of how we went after and were able to defeat the cartels, something called Killing Pablo by Mark Bowden. I know Mark. He's a good guy, good author, and he details how we were able to help bring in special operations to eliminate much of the cartels, which were preventing the Colombian government from becoming an effective government. So it has been done. It can be done. And I do believe with the right people, with the right strategies and the right resources, we can eliminate the cartels in Mexico and help the Mexican government regain control of its own sovereignty.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
Do you believe it's going to be messy along the way, because those cartels are making billions upon billions of dollars, whether it's through fentanyl or human trafficking? They're not going to want to give up so easy, Tony.
No, and that's the thing. The border is being controlled. It's not being controlled by us. They control it. The cartels control it. How do people need to ask this question? How do all those thousands of people make their way to the border? They do it via these cartels. These cartels essentially traffic humans. They make a lot of money, Rita, off of moving these people in the interior of South and Latin America. So that's got to stop. And oh, by the way, a guy named Soros helps fund a lot of that travel as well. They work hand in glove with the cartels to move these people. So we've got to take a hard look at these nonprofits. Our friends over at Judicial Watch, Chris Farrell, used to investigate this. I think they should look at that again, and also recognize that, like you said, it's going to be messy. It's going to require people start thinking out of the box. I actually wrote a book about this called The Last Line. It's a novel I wrote about 12 years ago, where we detail kind of a situation like this, where we finally get serious about going after the bad guys south of the border. So I hope someone picks it up in the administration, because they probably will come up with some pretty good ideas on how to have to go after those guys if they read the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, because they can learn from, just like you said, some of the past success. And obviously your great intel experience too, Tony. And what about the people that are already here, the sleeper cells, potentially foreign sleeper cells? I mean, we've seen how many reports of Iranians coming in, others on the terror watch list, Chinese coming in. That's what I worry, that one day they're going to say, okay, activate. Yeah,
and that's true. And that's where we have to, again, use the intelligence capability of the community to focus on bad guys, not on American citizens, which they've been doing. So I think Christopher Wray, before he left, did say a number of times that all the lights are blinking red. Well, I accept that as an assessment. What are we doing about it? That's what we have to get to now. And there should be a spectrum of organizations doing this, DHS, FBI, and DOD. I know people tend to forget this, but DOD can function within the continental United States. There's something called Title 10. There's traditional military activities. And essentially the way to remember it, Rita, is anything George Washington and the Continental Army did, you can do under Title 10. And that includes a range of things, which looks a lot like spying, as long as you're spying against bad guys. And so this is what we have to get back to. We have to use the full spectrum of resources available and get serious about figuring out where these networks are. Remember, Rita, I testified to this. We were targeting the 9/11 folks, Al-Qaeda, before 9/11, and they had cells here. And it was through ignoring those cells that we identified that the ultimate attacks happened. So we cannot make that mistake again. Obviously, I'd like to believe we've learned our lesson from the 9/11 Commission's report.
Yeah, I hope so, certainly. As we're talking about all these threats, what about Iran? How galvanized are they? What kind of capabilities do they have? Because we know that they obviously have had many assassination threats against President Trump. When he was on the campaign trail, now he's in the Oval Office. How concerned should we be?
Well, we should be very concerned. I mean, they're obviously operating within the United States. I think, again, we have to reassess what the threat is, bring resources to bear. We kind of can track these things. We just have chosen not to do it. My biggest concern is still the nuclear weapons program. They have made progress, no doubt. I do believe they have at least one or two nuclear weapons already, but they're not deliverable. That is to say that they don't have enough weapons or delivery systems to get them to where they need to be to make them usable. There's things that need to be done to defund the Iranian government, the mullahs, IRGC. President Trump did it before. I think he'll do it again. But it's got to be, again, a full court press. You got to look at domestic issues regarding what they're doing here, where they're at, as well as start putting pressure on them at the international level and basically removing all the funding that they were given or stop them getting funding that they were getting through sanctions relief and things like that.
Aren't you astounded that President Biden did not really put almost any pressure? And in fact, they were allowing them, the Iranians, essentially to continue so much with oil, with their funding. All of this was funding the war machine.
Of course. Well, you mentioned Robert Malley and others who were involved in this. So they were essentially trying to give benefit to the mullahs, and it was insane. We've had a number of opportunities to actually do something to destabilize Iran. And every time we had the opportunity, we didn't do it. Barack Obama could have encouraged the Green Revolution in Iran. That is to say, there was a movement to throw off the yoke of oppression, the mullahs, and we did nothing to help that, although we did Arab Spring at the same time. And then we've the Democrats have always deferred to Iran and the mullahs since Zbigniew Brzezinski back in the Carter days. As a matter of fact, Carter helped facilitate the removal of the Shah, which then resulted in the mullahs coming to power. This all can be traced back to the Carter administration, and it's only fitting that the Biden administration, which, when Jimmy Carter died, Joe Biden became the worst living president. And I think a lot of the things that Biden did, the Carter people started off in the 1970s. So it's all bad, and we've got to get a handle on trying to, again, isolate the mullahs and make sure that they cannot facilitate completion of nuclear weapons that could be used against the Israelis or other allies.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's a huge concern. Where do you see it going to with Israel and Hamas? Do you think that they will, keep this deal, the Hamas side, or is this just another game?
Hamas will keep the deal as long as they see advantage. Right now, they're seeing advantage because, first off, they're not being attacked by the Israelis. That's the first advantage. Secondly, they're trying to reinsinuate themselves into leadership positions in Gaza. I think this is going to be short-lived. I don't think they're going to be able to rearm. I think the Egyptians are going to stop the Philadelphia corridor from being used to smuggle things in, which is good news. But they're going to try to reinsinuate themselves. I do agree with President Trump on this. He said he sees for the first phase probably working okay. Phase 2, Phase 3, not so much. I think there's going to be real issues in about 3 weeks because they're going to be out of hostages that they can turn back, and the Israelis want to finish the job. So I think that there's going to be another deal, probably one that President Trump approves. Because remember, Rita, this was Joe Biden's deal. President Trump just got it across the finish line for him. I think President Trump's going to relook things. I think he's going to talk to Netanyahu and figure out how best to bring a permanent end to the conflict. I don't think it's going to be a two-state solution. I think it's going to be something where the Abraham Accords are used in some form to bring in other Arab allies to help bring stability to the region. But I think it's going to look a lot different in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, and boy, we're all watching and, of course, praying however many can get out, the hostages in the meantime before things, like you said, start collapsing. The other hot spot, of course, is what's going on with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
The word is sort of Ukraine's ready to come to the table. Trump in the last few days has been putting out a lot of messages on social media. He repeated this when he addressed the crowd in Davos also, saying that he wants to meet with Putin immediately. He seems to be wanting to put pressure on them, saying you better make a deal now or it's going to get lot worse for you. Do you think he can bring Putin to the table, and is a deal near?
Oh, yeah. So there's been back channel communications going on for weeks. And I don't think it's going to be hard to get Putin to the table. I think a lot of the language that President Trump is using is not really necessary. The big sticking point was Tony Blinken. There's a New York Times article out which identifies how Blinken was never seeking peace. As a matter of fact, they call him the Secretary of War in the article. Now, remember, Rita, the New York Times is not a conservative publication, and they are calling out one of their guys. So it has to be even more severe than they're talking about it. But in essence, what we've come to learn that Blinken was never trying to ratchet things down. Even when the Pentagon was trying to take a step back and say, hey, we don't want to escalate, Blinken pushed for the escalation. So it's very clear that there was no attempt to bring this thing to a conclusion. That's the change of policy. President Trump has said as a matter of policy, we want the war ended. So with that said, he's been talking about the fact that the Russian economy is weak. I tend to believe that's true. The Chinese have not followed through with some of the agreements they made regarding buying Russian oil. I think that's hurting them. Clearly, the Ukrainians are spent. They're talking about now bringing in and recruiting, drafting 18-year-olds, which is going to be very controversial. So these are all the things that both sides need to recognize. The war needs to end. And I think President Trump has got, I think Keith Kellogg is going to be working this, General Kellogg. So I think at some point you're going to see the two men meet. Probably, I think Fico, the leader of Slovenia, is going to facilitate the meeting. They're probably going to meet in Slovenia, probably in about 2 to 3 weeks. I think probably 3 weeks at the outside.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Wow, which is, right around the corner in terms of timing. And, in conclusion, Tony, how much do you believe so much of sort of this chaos? President Trump said this again, and has repeated it a number of times and repeated it again this week, saying that this wouldn't have happened if he was there, that all this with Russia, and Ukraine wouldn't have happened, that, October 7th would not have happened, the dismal Afghanistan withdrawal. How much do you attribute sort of this world in chaos to just terrible planning and terrible instigation and terrible missteps by the Biden administration, whether intentional or not?
All of it's their fault. And this is why. The world leaders out there, to include Putin, figured out that Biden wasn't actually able to be president. They figured it out way before the mainstream media did. We saw it. Rita, when I was part of the Trump 2020 campaign, I was doing editorials on the fact that Joe Biden was not fit to be president. Nobody seemed to listen. Once he was in office, he would say things like, yeah, it's okay if Putin takes just a little bit. Well, of course, that opens the door. And then you amplify that by the fact that other leaders watch everything. And, oh, by the way, they've got intelligence services. Rita, I would bank I would put a month's pay out and bet that Putin had full understanding of how hobbled Joe Biden was via his intelligence service. They figured it out. Most nations did. And once they figured it out, Katie barred the door. They knew there to be no strong response at all because no one could actually respond adequately or in a timely way. That's why we see the chaos. Everything from the Afghanistan withdrawal to China eating our lunch to Hamas, Iran, all of it. It would have never happened if you had a strong, steady hand who was willing to take political risks and do the right thing in the form of Donald Trump. That's why if Trump was in, had he been able to become president, we'll leave it at that, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, I think so many people believe had Trump been in the last 4 years, the world would look just so different. It would be a very, very different place. But at least they see there's a new sheriff in town, and they seem to be waking up very quickly. Everybody be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. And Tony, thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, for your great insights and also your very much love and great service to this country. Thank you, Tony.
Oh, thank you, Rita. Always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.